Greetings. This is Rosalind Parks with National Network View News. Tonight, Global View contributor Brian E. Muhammad, Final Call news writer, will discuss 20 years of war in Afghanistan and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's October 2002 letter to President George W. Bush regarding America's warmongering. Medical contributor Dr. Akili Muhammad will discuss public concerns about the COVID-19 variants and future strains and mounting evidence that vaccinated people are the spreaders. Later in the show, Sister Collette will discuss food preservation and canning techniques. Before we delve into the top news, let's do a recap of the current events we've recently covered. Recently, I spoke with Global View contributor Brian E. Muhammad, Final Call news writer, who discussed the fear and uncertainty in Afghanistan as U.S. troops depart. Can you give us some information as to what is happening in Afghanistan?
Wow. Well, the United States have just removed themselves from Afghanistan. And I would really say they were put out of Afghanistan as the latest empire that lost a war. Afghanistan is known throughout the world as the graveyard of empires. And the United States went in 20 years ago, as we know, and it has now come out defeated, deflated, and it's going to be a new chapter for Afghanistan, but certainly another chapter in terms of how the U.S. government is going to handle this public embarrassment of such a loss.
Sister Sherry Muhammad, founder and director of Asiatic Minds Online School, and Sister Kimberly Muhammad, English instructor, discussed how Asiatic Minds English class will improve students' communication skills and English language proficiency. As Asiatic Minds curriculum and courses help students develop the necessary skills and abilities to build a bright future, how important is it for English language proficiency in students' success?
Once again, thank you for having us, Rosalind. And it's absolutely important, the proficiency of language, because after all, we were tricked by the English language into slavery. And so in order for us, our students, to progress in any subject that they want to do, they must understand and be proficient in the language in which they speak. That way they can articulate their thoughts properly, their feelings and emotions, and they can also understand others and be able to pick up on the nuances if there is something not quite right and incorrect words are being used. So it is absolutely important, that proficiency piece.
Weekly contributor Dr. Akili Muhammad updated us on the latest information regarding the COVID-19 pandemic, its variants, and its impact. Okay. Now, how did ivermectin even become a COVID medicine?
Yeah, there's a thing in medicine that happens on a frequent basis where during testing, we will find that a medication may have a side effect, or a medication may have something that it does different than what we thought and what the idea was from the medication from the beginning. And that is something that has happened. The medication is being used. I don't know the story on how it started, but the medication, as the clip said, and of course, I'm not a veterinarian. I've never used it for animals, but I have used it in the past for people that have had parasites. And we're not talking about parasites on a level like people typically talk about on social media, but I mean literal like worms and things that people have in their bodies, which is not common.
Okay.
But I've used it for that. And they found that it has anti-inflammatory as well as antiviral properties, which are both very important things when it comes to fighting COVID-19.
On I Have a Testimony, NNV News anchor Willie Muhammad's guest was Sister Amina X, an educator, art activist, and a member of the Cultural Revolution, who also teaches at MUI. Sister Amina X discussed being of Chinese descent and the guidance she offers others as a member of the NOI, the attacks against members of the Asian community, false ideas that exist about Asian and Black communities, and more.
Can you briefly share a little bit more about the letter that Mao Zedong that he wrote?
Yes, it was an 11-page telegram. At that time, Mao was fighting classism. He did not believe in, the working poor being really poor. He wanted equality, and he found an alliance or found parallel movements with the Black American Civil Rights Movement as fighting against injustices and the poor taking advantage, or the rich, taking advantage of the poor. And so he believed that if we support the Black movement in America, we can free all oppressed people all around the world. So he supported the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad in uplifting Black people in America.
Sister Amina X also discussed her work as a cultural revolutionary, teaching students at MUI.
How did your love for art first begin?
My grandmother was an art teacher in China. And so when I was a little girl, when she told me stories, she would draw them out while she was telling me the stories. So I literally saw stories come alive right in front of me. And I saw the power of storytelling. I saw the power of images. So that was deeply ingrained in me as a young girl. And it has guided my career, it has guided my spiritual path. Art to me is the process of spiritual cultivation. And so I see the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan as one of the greatest artists I have ever met. It is in the way that he teaches, it's his as a musician, so yeah, art has been a guiding force in my life that Allah has been communicating to me through.
Sister Sherry Muhammad, founder and director of Asiatic Minds Online School, and student minister Daniel Muhammad, Asiatic Minds chess instructor, discussed how chess class will benefit students. Now, can chess help improve Asiatic Minds students' level of focus and concentration in class? And if so, how so?
Absolutely. Well, in public and charter schools, one of the biggest issues is that they say that our children are very impulsive, that we don't know how to behave ourselves, we have no self-control or discipline. And all of those features are answered by our study of the game of chess. Chess teaches you several things. Number one, the discipline, right? Because you're not going to be good, you're not going to win if you can't exercise discipline. It also teaches you how to control your impulses. Impulsive chess players are always penalized. We love them. They're easy to defeat. So it teaches you how to control those things. And most importantly, what chess teaches is to look ahead and start planning in advance. And that's one of the things that I think the students will not just carry through their chess career or through their schooling career, but it's going to carry over into their adult life as well.
Weekly contributor Dr. Akili Muhammad discussed the spread of COVID-19 and its variants and the impact around the world, the FDA's decision to fully authorize Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine, and the vaccine mandates. There has been some new information that has come out within the last week or so. One of the hot button words is recombination. Can you explain to us what that is?
Yes, ma'am. Let me first just read the definition for everybody, because I think it will help with the explanation. So the definition is the process of recombining things. And then the one that's more relative to the medical field is the rearrangement of genetic material, especially by crossing over in chromosomes or by the artificial joining of segments of DNA from different organisms.
Wow.
And so just to wrap it up, it would be intervention of people. It's not a normal process. So anytime you see something that says recombinant, that means some scientists went into a laboratory and started to co-join things that aren't naturally co-joined. And so that's what the word genetically modified can mean. And other words in medicine that are indicative of the fact that there's been some human intervention and it's not a natural process.
On our I Have a Testimony show, NNV News anchor Willie Muhammad's guest was Sister Wazira Muhammad, project manager and interior decorator, who is helping to beautify the New Orleans mosque after Hurricane Katrina. Sister Wazira discussed working in Atlanta along with the Southern Regional Minister, Brother Abdul Sharif Muhammad, with the 10,000 Fearless, modeling for the Modest clothing line, and receiving her holy name.
I was told that you played a part in the decoration and the decor of that special day, because I know there was a wedding later on, but when you see the videos, it's just heavenly, right? When we talk about heaven, I would imagine if that was some real place outside of the planet Earth, it would look something like that. Can you talk about that experience?
Yes. Sister BJ, Sister Betsy Jean Farrakhan, was like the director that day. I forget the official title. And then Sister Maria, of course, I'm on a team with Sister Maria Farrakhan. And the minister actually had a vision before, like, all the background scenes of, you know, of what he saw. And so we were able to be a part of bringing that vision into reality. And you could actually, before the criterion started, you could feel the spirit in the garden. Like, it felt like we were standing on holy ground.
Let's pause for announcements from our sponsors. Coming up, Global View contributor Brian E. Muhammad, Final Call news writer, will discuss 20 years of war in Afghanistan and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's October 2002 letter to President George W. Bush. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps us to highlight solutions for a brighter tomorrow. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Asiatic Minds, online education, helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness, as well as the greatness of our people, and upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Call now, 502-219-4848.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
The hashtag Bank Black social media campaign made strides not only in revolutionizing how we bank, but also how we think. The movement inspired thousands of African Americans across the country to transfer or deposit millions of dollars into Black-owned banks. These are banks that will invest in urban communities, employ African Americans, support Black businesses, and inspire Black home ownership. This is a very proud moment for our culture as we are taking small, but significant, steps towards building Black power through Black wealth.
Thank you for tuning in to NNV News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, National Network View. This is Clifton Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
As America's 20-year occupation of Afghanistan ends, there are many who question whether America's war in Afghanistan was doomed from the beginning. Joining us to discuss is Global View contributor and Final Call newspaper staff writer, Brian E. Muhammad. Greetings, sir.
Greetings, Sister Rosalind. Thank you.
Yes, sir. After the bombing of the World Trade Center in New York, then President George W. Bush accused the Taliban of sheltering Osama bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, and they also claimed that they were responsible for the tragedy. After 20 years of war, was Bush's allegations ever proven?
Well, you know, yeah, they accused Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda, and yes, they did accuse the Taliban of sheltering Osama bin Laden, you know, against being held accountable for this accusation for 9/11, and they used that as a pretext, you know, as a false flag, in fact, to go into Afghanistan and go to war in Afghanistan, and to use this as a pretext for this so-called war on terror that they have used as an excuse over the last 20 years or so to go to war there as well as elsewhere. But at the time, if we go back in history, the Taliban actually was cooperating with the Bush administration. They just said that we just present us the proof that bin Laden did this and we will help you capture him. This was the claim. And George Bush, in his arrogant white supremacist way, said, we're not negotiating with you, and decided that war was better than negotiating and keeping the semblance of peace, especially after the drastic events that took place a month before in New York City.
Well, in October of 2002, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan wrote a letter to President George W. Bush. Did Minister Farrakhan warn President Bush in that letter?
You know, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, as we've been mentioning, is a faithful warner from God. And if we're correct, and we are correct, that he's a faithful warner from God, inherent in warning is a mercy. And the minister, in his October letter, which you can find on NOI.org, just go to the statements and look for it. He was saying to the president that this war is not the way to go, that you will trigger another situation. And if you don't listen to advisors, because there were advisors who was also, even though America was all up in arms and they were saying we must get these terrorists for 9/11, there were also voices of reason saying that war is not the answer. And the minister was one of those voices to say peace. And he warned him that as people, as past leaders who did not listen to voices of reason, they ended up losing the credibility on the world stage. And this is exactly what we see happen 20 years later. And all of the bloodshed and killing later, America is on its own on the world stage with no credibility, no trust, and all loss of friendship.
Was America's war in Afghanistan doomed from the beginning? I know you just mentioned that the president had advisors in addition to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan warning him not to go to war in the first place. So do you think this war was doomed from the beginning, from the start?
I think it was. You know, you will not be successful on the premise of injustice and lying. It was emotional response, again, to the tragic events of 9/11, to see 3,000 people die in an act that they claim was an act of terrorism, you know? So people were in pain. People were in a very emotional state, and you don't make good decisions in an emotional state. But they knew better, because there were other things that were going on the world stage that gave them cause to want to go to war.
Okay.
They used 9/11 and manipulated the pain of the American people to justify going to war, for reasons that was really selfish and not so much to go after bin Laden and terrorism and all of the so-called noble reasons. And they don't tell the American people why they were there in the first place. Why were you there for 20 years? You know, when Al-Qaeda was depleted and the Taliban, if you say that they were the problem, they were finished in 1 year or 2 years into the war. Bin Laden was supposedly have been killed in 2010 or 2011. But my point is, the reason why you said you went there, you accomplished. Why did you stay?
Why did you stay? Now, in those 20 years, why was there never a thriving economy built in Afghanistan?
Because the whole interest was to go to war to hopefully control the benefits that are found in Afghanistan and in that region. It's a very rich resource region. It was the oil there. There's all kinds of mineral resources that the world community especially have interest in. So they had no desire to build up Afghanistan's economy. And then what happened by the time now you get 20 years in and this thing comes to an end, so-called, comes to an end, the whole economy, they created a situation of dependency of all of the governments up until the very last one that America propped up. It was America's money that kept that going. And so when America decided and finally realized we lost, we got to get up out of here, the money goes with that. And so that's the dilemma that we see right now in Afghanistan. Okay. America left with the bag.
Now, if the United States doesn't stop war making and exit the Middle East, from what I understand, we're there in a certain capacity in a few places. Will it be a final showdown?
This is the great warning from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, that if you don't cease and desist, you are placing yourself into a position where you will end up in the war of all wars. And that is called Armageddon in the scriptures. And when you enter into Armageddon, you're going to leave here in the thousands and you're going to come back in the tens. In the tens, not 10,000s, in the tens. And so, yes, that is the thing that the Honorable Mr. Louis Farrakhan is trying to avert in his warnings. He doesn't want to see America destroyed. If America can have an extension of time, that will be better for her. But she keeps doing these acts that is putting her clearly into not the pathway of enemies around the world, but in the very pathway of God himself. And God is in it for, God is an all taker. He's not, he ain't trying to get you, he owns everything. He will wipe you from the face of the earth. This is your next step, America, if you don't stop.
Yes, sir. Now, are more and more nations turning away from America and essentially becoming enemies instead of allies?
Yes. And this last fiasco in Afghanistan is the proof that when the United States decided to leave and get out of there, the rest of them only was in Afghanistan, England and France, and the rest of them were only there in support of America and its so-called war on terror. So now when you leave and America was the only one that lost treasure and blood, her brothers in Europe lost treasure and blood. So America is not a trusted entity on the world stage now. And so, yes, she has lost friendship, and they have no more kind of, they don't see her in any real credible way any longer. It's finished.
Hmm. And very quickly, Brother Brian, we've seen recent news outlets report different images of the Taliban takeover and so forth. Do you think there's a likelihood of more death following this 20-year war?
Oh, yeah, because in that region of the world, they were always vying for influence and power. Okay. See? So you got all these groups whose only containment was because America's air raids and Europe air raids were there to hold them at bay. So now that America realized it's a lost cause and we're out of here, and the rest of them said we out of here. Now it's left for them to fight with one another as they have always did. Mm-hmm. See, it's just like what they did in Libya. Brother Gaddafi held these forces at bay. But when they decided to eliminate him and use some of them to do that, it opened the door for them to do what they have always done and into this acute tribalism and fight. So yes, there will be civil war, mark my words, and America is not finished. Because this, because she said, okay, we're out of Afghanistan in that way, but we still have our fight on terror. So we're going to still go after terrorists, like the ones who bombed and killed 13 servicemen before America, as America was leaving.
Yes.
So that would be her pretext to go back in militarily. It's a sick thing, and that's why she has to be warned. Stop the madness. If you want to live, if you want to have a future, stop the madness.
Yes, sir. Brother Brian, as always, we really appreciate your insight on the happenings around the world. We look forward to speaking with you again next Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Rosalind.
Yes, sir. Let's pause for announcements from our sponsors. Then, medical contributor Dr. Akili Muhammad will update us on public concerns about the COVID-19 variants and future strains, as well as the mounting evidence that vaccinated people are the spreaders. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Worldwide, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Download the Final Call Radio app and take us everywhere. On your phone, on your computer, on your tablet, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also log on to finalcall.com and click the Listen Live button or finalcallradio.com. Final Call Radio, the official voice of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam.
Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel at National Network View. I am Anissa Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
Amid public concerns about the various COVID-19 variants and future strains, there's mounting evidence that vaccinated people are the majority spreaders. Joining us to discuss this in more detail is medical contributor Dr. Akili Muhammad. Greetings, sir.
Greetings, ma'am. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you, sir. Dr. Akili, what are your thoughts about the new strain, the Mu strain of the coronavirus?
Well, my thought initially is that it's propaganda to continue to talk about these different strains. You know, it's pretty common information for the general public that every year there's probably a different strain of the flu. And most people know that, if you get a common cold, it's a different strain than you got the last time you got it. And so we're talking about the same reality with the coronavirus. It's going to continue to mutate. It's just going to be something that's going to happen on a regular basis, mainly because the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in his monumental address, July 4th, 2020, spoke that there would be mutations that we wouldn't be able to keep up with. And then in addition to that, that's generally what happens with viruses. So I think that it is propaganda to keep people in fear, because we seem to be continuing to get information that these strains are getting worse. Well, the reality is that what you are doing to protect yourself, and if you've already been infected, you are doing the things that you need to do, or your body has gone through the ability to produce antibodies that will protect you in the future. So I think people should continue to focus on what it is they need to do and not focus on so much of the information that's coming about the strains.
Now, should the public be worried about this and the future strains at all?
Well, like I say, if anybody has been infected, and, to me, I think it's very difficult for anybody in the world, again, as I said before, unless you live in very remote places. If you live in any type of congested urban area, you probably have been exposed to it. Okay. And so if you have been sick from the coronavirus, any of the strains, any of the mutations, or if you have been exposed and your body fought it off, you are very well protected. And it's been shown in many parts of the world that a person who has been infected has much better antibody and much better protection than any vaccine. And we're talking about all the different vaccines around the world. They are not comparing to your natural immunity. So we have to go back to believing in God, understanding that our immune system came from God. So if you do the things that takes care of that, or you've been infected and you got over it, you're protected. So, fear should go down, not being careful, continue to be careful, but fear should go down and our confidence should go up that we're going to be okay if we continue to do the right things and protect ourselves.
Now, there's mounting evidence that that vaccinated people are the majority of the spreaders of the Delta strain. Yes. Does that concern you?
It concerns me, yes, because of this whole idea that people want to get back to normal. And like we saw, when the numbers dropped in June, people went back to normal to these, concerts, these sporting events, and just different parties and, vaccinated parties, with all those type of things. And we're looking at the reality of people dropping their guard. So the number of cases that we have across this country and in other places of the world was because people thought that vaccination was a solution. And now we're seeing that vaccination is not the solution. It's the major problem at this point. And it's been proven again in many parts of the world with many scientists saying that it is the vaccinated people that are spreading this Delta variant more than any other part of society. And of course, we know in this country, the unvaccinated were blamed, but that's just not true.
Right. And what have these new occurrences done to healthcare workers' confidence in the vaccine?
Well, I think that a lot of people in the healthcare field are 100% committed to it and they believe in it. And so as I speak to some of my colleagues around the country, some of them are just absolutely pro-vaccine because they're seeing a lot of people in whatever avenue of the field that they work in. They're seeing a lot of unvaccinated people get sick. And then you have others that say, I'm seeing maybe more vaccinated people sick than I am unvaccinated people. So they, of course, don't have confidence in the vaccine. And of course, some of the people that I'm talking to are seeing strange cases and things that they don't know what to do with. And the community and their hospitals or their environments don't know what to do with. And so they are against the vaccine. So I think, time will tell, but I believe it's going to come to a place where most healthcare workers will either not want to get it, which is there's still a large percentage of them that don't. And many that are pro-vaccine, they're going to see some things that are going to change their mind. And I think that's coming pretty soon.
Right. And speaking of that, we're noticing that more and more information is coming out daily about the vaccines needing a booster. So,
Yes.
what is the overall effect of the lack of performance from these vaccines by themselves or against these new variants that are coming out?
Yeah, well, I think if we go back to some of the science of the beginning of this whole pandemic, when they were talking about these new vaccines, the fact that this vaccine is only interested, and I shouldn't say only, I'm talking about the vaccines all over the world. The majority of them are similar technology. They're working to try to make the body react to the spike protein. The difference in the immune system that God has given us is that we destroy the entire viral plasmid. And if we get infected and it becomes a virus, we destroy the entire virus. And we know the immune system knows every solitary aspect of that. And so because these vaccines are taking a specific aspect of it and presenting that to the body, the vaccinated person is not going to be able to figure out the next mutation or the next strain because it only has one aspect of it. And so a natural immune system is better prepared. And so when we're talking about not only in the next few months, but we're talking about years to come because of what we are already seeing with these mutations, the vaccinated person is not prepared because the body is not being prepared like some of the former vaccines are supposedly supposed to do. It's not being prepared to look at the entire virus. And if you looked at the entire virus, then you'll be able to recognize when they change a little bit because you still have an understanding of the basis of it. Mm-hmm. And so because these vaccines aren't coming from that perspective of the entire virus, it's going to be troublesome for vaccinated people, and they're going to not be protected in the future like they thought they were when these vaccines first came out.
Right. So, Dr. Akili, we're looking at first doses, second doses, and now booster shots with fall right upon us, coming to us quickly.
Yes.
Has the coronavirus essentially replaced the flu?
Some people are saying that. There are scientists out there saying that the coronavirus has replaced the flu. And then there are people that are saying because of the fact that people were trying to protect themselves more during the cold months of this last year, that is the reason. I only believe it will be time that will tell. It really comes down to how many people continue to get tested, because there are people that I know of personally that have had cold symptoms or have had the flu symptoms, got tested, and it didn't come back positive with a coronavirus test. Now, we do know that there are a lot of false positives and false negatives, so I don't know how much we can completely rely on this information. But I don't believe that just because coronavirus is the majority thing right now, that all of these other viruses that we've been dealing with all of our lives have just completely gone away. I just don't believe that. I believe that we have a lot of misinformation and disinformation. And so like the news that I read today about somebody in Israel talking about the fact that people are going to need a fourth booster. They're talking about people in Israel are going to need a fourth booster before the cold season comes. I think that's what we're going to start seeing, more and more push of more and more vaccines. And it's going to cause a serious divide. But I think the real problem I see coming is people seeing that the vaccine is not what they thought it was going to be. And I think it's going to cause some vitriol, not only in this country, but many countries around the world.
No, thank you, Dr. Akili. And finally, what is going on with the Ultimate Wellness Group?
Yes, ma'am. Well, today we'll be discussing these very topics with an ICU nurse and a family physician. The ICU nurse has traveled all around this country during this pandemic, and now currently she works in Arkansas. And the physician is from Baton Rouge. So they'll be talking about their specific, experiences with this Delta variant, what they're seeing, how things are working in their area of the country, so that we, again, can look at some of the differences And of course, I'll be expressing some things I heard from some friends that are in the medical field as well. And we'll just be talking about what we need to do going forward, how to protect ourselves, how to stay confident, and not let the overall negativity of this pandemic wear us down and make us weary so that we'll give into some of the wrong things like stress or giving in to taking this vaccine. So that's what we'll be discussing tonight on blackstream.live/TUWG. Join us if you will.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Akili, again for your insight. And we look forward to speaking with you again next week.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Let's pause for announcements from our sponsors. When we return, Sister Collette Muhammad will discuss food preservation and canning techniques. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps to combat false media. Cash App NNV News.
Asiatic Minds, online education, helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness as well as the greatness of our people. And upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Classes begin September 1st. To enroll, visit AsiaticMinds.com.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
Greetings from National Network View. This week's Final Call cover story headline reads, "Separate and Be Saved. America's race problems and deadly race interactions are growing worse. It is time we leave the children of our former slave masters and 400-year-old tormentors. Separation from whites is the only and best solution to this problem, a serious problem that is rooted in prophecy." This FCN volume number 41 edition middle page article by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is entitled "A Case for Separation." To read more, subscribe to finalcalldigital.com and tune in to the all-new Final Call Radio. This is the nnvnews.com Final Call cover report.
Please make sure you leave your comments and questions in the comment section below. Follow us on Facebook, National Network View, and make sure to check us out on Twitter as well, National Network View. This is Sergio Gutierrez with National Network View, signing off.
Sister Collette is on a mission to teach the skill of canning your own foods to ensure long-term food preservation for you, your family, and your community. Her classes aim to remove all fear and anxiety you may have about starting your own canning journey by welcoming you into her kitchen and virtually coming into yours. Here with us to discuss further is Sister Collette Muhammad. Greetings, ma'am.
Greetings to you. Peace and blessings. How are you, sis?
Great, great. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, ma'am. Sister Collette, when did you start canning?
Okay, one of my favorite questions to answer. Well, to say when I first started canning, I have to qualify how I learned how to can in the first place. So just briefly, I'm an MGT. So I'm a registered member of the Nation of Islam. Okay, and so the sisters, the females in the Nation of Islam, we have 7 training units. And those training units are how to keep house, how to rear our children, how to take care of our husbands, sew, cook, and just in general, how to act at home and abroad. And so approximately the year 2015, 16, around thereabouts, we were in our cooking curriculum. And so the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, who is the absolute head of our class, he gave us the instruction to learn the skill of canning. And so that's how it began. We were in a very intense curriculum. It lasted several months, and we had to learn everything from kitchen safety to how food spoils, the different types of foods, low acid, high acid, before we even touched the canner. Okay. And so we studied that for quite a while, and then we got into it. And so after we actually learned the skill, we had to actually produce a certain amount of jars to actually qualify ourselves to move on. So we learned one thing that's called water bath canning, also known as boiling. We had to learn that skill. After we mastered that skill, we had to produce a certain amount of jars. Then we moved on to what's called pressure canning. Same thing. We had to master that and produce a certain amount of jars. So that's how I learned. And so it hasn't been a long time. So I'm not this person, that's been canning for 20 years on a homestead. That's not me. I'm the person that, like many of us, we're in the class and we're obedient to the instruction that we were given then and that we continue to get today.
Yes, ma'am. Now, did your first few attempts at canning fail? What was that like?
They didn't fail. And I say that because we were under prestigious guidance. Okay. So the Nation of Islam, we do everything right in the back. And the leadership that we were under is just like that. And we're not, we don't move on. We don't half step anything in that class. And so when you leave that class, you're an expert, you should be. Now your confidence may be down. Your anxiety may still be high. You still may have some apprehension. Okay. But, we were equipped with everything we needed to know to be successful at canning. And so when I was out the class and home canning on my own, I did have some apprehension. I did have some anxiety because now I was alone in my own kitchen, right? I didn't have my captain and my lieutenant there, kind of walking me and guiding me along the way. And so because of that memory that I still have of that, that's where, I know a lot of us still have that. And I strive to help sisters and brothers along to kind of remove that anxiety and fear and apprehension that they have.
Yes, ma'am. Now, last year, 2020 hit us hard. We saw lots of lines. For example, at grocery stores, we ran into a few food shortages. Canning is what I would say, and what I'm sure most would consider a survival skill. What inspired you to begin teaching this survival skill?
Yes, another awesome question.
Yes,
so
thank you.
You're exactly right. 2020, I would say early 20, well, for one thing, once we were given the instruction to learn, the Honorable Minister Farrakhan continuously gives guidance and reminds us to continue to can until we can't. Okay, so the question is, what did God's man see? Why, this is divine guidance we're getting from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So that's where it starts, right? And so when you're under that obedience, you have to, find yourself like, why does he keep telling us to do this? And so, like you said, 2020 came and things were starting to creep up, and we were constantly getting hit even harder. Even to this day, we constantly get a weekly reminder from the minister to continue to can until you can't. And those days are coming that we can't. And so in 2020, when things started to kick off, I started to pick up my speed in canning. Like, okay, let me really get this canning thing going. And it was starting to bother me, constantly getting that reminder from the minister. And then you realize, did I can this week? Did I can last week? And you realize you're not being obedient. So that's a problem. And so you get to a point where you realize, it starts to, weigh on you like, okay, I'm not being obedient, And so that's when I started to pick up my speed. And then as these current events start to kick in, I realized, okay, this is real, and so that's when I said, I got to reach the masses of the people and try to get our people up to speed of what's going on and how they can preserve food in their homes using the canning method.
Yes. Now, for those of us who are very, very new to this, can you explain a little bit in not too much detail, but a little bit about canning food? How long does canned food last? And does the length of time vary between different types of foods?
Good question again. So simply put, what canning is, So I have a couple jars here. So you hear the word jarring and canning. They mean the same exact thing. Okay, so don't let that confuse anybody. So like here's some carrots, here's some green beans. Okay, I got a few things here, but simply put, canning is putting food in a jar, okay, putting the lid on it, placing it into a heated environment that gets to a certain temperature for a certain amount of time, okay, depending on what that food is, then removing it from that canner, allowing it to cool and create a seal, a non-removable seal, unless you use like a can opener. So that's how the process works, okay? So after that has happened and you test your lids and you know that everything is, sealed on there tight, you store this away in a like cool, dark place or what have you. And this will last you for a year and beyond, okay? And so when I say a year and beyond, the first year is when the food is at its best quality, okay? So you do want to, check your food, move it forward. When you get to that year mark, you might want to consider eating it. If you're stocked up, if you're not stocked up, you might want to wait till you get your stock back up. But, after that first year, what could possibly happen is that your food may begin to, the color may begin to fade, texture might start to break down, and nutritional value will begin to decline. But it does not mean that all of a sudden bacteria jump inside the jar. No, that's not what happens. It just means that it's at its best in the first year.
Right. Okay. With canning, the picture that I have in my head is if you go, for example, to the supermarket and buy a jar of, spaghetti sauce. When you open the lid, there's a little pop that occurs when you open that. Is that essentially what you're doing at home?
That is correct. So you're going to break that seal. So you create a vacuum seal during that canning process. And then when you're able to eat it and you actually open it, you will hear that pop. You will hear that pop.
Okay. Now, do certain foods can best or better than others?
I would say not. You're going to follow the directions according to your specific recipe, and you're going to be fine. We have two different types of canning method. Well, there's three actually, but the two major ones that are used right now are what's called the water bath and pressure canning. Your water bath method is usually used for your high acid foods. That's going to be like your fruits and sauces and things like that, higher on the acidity chart. So it would fall 4.6 and below on the pH acidity chart. And so your low acid foods would be things like your vegetables, carrots, green beans, your meats, and like your navy beans, any type of lentil. All right. And so they fall on the pH scale from 4.6 and above. Okay. And so that's a scale that you use to determine what type of method you would use to can, but they both work. They both work well.
They both work well. Now, you did say that there aren't really any foods that can best or can better than others. Are there foods that cannot or should not be canned?
Now that's okay. So yeah, there you go. So I would refer someone with that question to the National Center for Home Food and Preservation, and they have some great guidance on there on what foods should not be preserved that way. But things like, I would say, they say, no milk, things like that, or like rice, things that are going to be very, very low on the acidity chart, where it would not be safe to home preserve them. Now, we buy these things in the store, but we're talking about home food preservation. But if you visit that website, they're definitely going to give you the breakdowns of what foods to stay away from and what foods are safe to do that. In any canning book that you purchase, any official canning book is going to have all official recipes in there, so you'll be safe.
Yes, ma'am. And Sister Collette, a couple of questions. When is your next class? How can our viewers sign up, and how can you be reached?
Okay, so I just completed a free masterclass last week and 2 weeks before that. So my goal is to offer the free masterclass at least twice a month, probably about twice a month, okay? And that's free. And so in that class, I usually cover the basics of canning, what canning is, the different types of canning, different types of food, all the many, many benefits of canning. And that's what you'll get in that. It'll kind of just give you, an idea of what canning is for those of us who just have no idea. And I think it's a good start for people like that. And then after that class, if you're ready, I offer a variety of virtual classes online. So if you visit my website at www.canningwithcollette.com, you can choose what type of class you want to take. I have high acid foods on there. I have a class for salsa. I think that one is coming up on the 11th, I believe. Yeah, I believe so. This Saturday, I have a salsa class coming up, virtual salsa class. I have a strawberry jelly class coming up. I have a grape jelly class coming up. I also offer the complete pressure canning course, and that's like a 3 to 4 day virtual class. So we meet several times because it's a bit more intense, that type of class. And so that's on there for someone who's really wants to start, making like your vegetables and your bean soups and things like that. It's a more foundational class. It's really going to get you the food that you need for survival. And I also have on there a introduction to canning that you can actually purchase. So if you can't make the free class for whatever reason, you can actually purchase it. And the same stuff is on there. What canning is, what types of cannings are there, what are the benefits, what equipment do I need to get started? You can purchase that as well on the same website.
Yes, ma'am. And can we get that website one more time?
Yes, let me slow down. No, I'm talking fast.
You're fine.
It's www.canningwithcollette, your sister by nature, Sister Collette.
And Sister Collette, you're also on Instagram, which is where I saw you and found out about your class. Can you give us your Instagram handle as well?
Yes, I can be found on Instagram, and that is my main page that I use for promoting and educating. So it's at Sister Collette on Instagram. It's Sister Collette Muhammad on Facebook. Sis Collette on TikTok, but I don't know what I'm doing over there. And I have a new YouTube channel that has a few videos uploaded, and the channel is Sister Collette.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us, Sister Collette.
Thank
I
you,
will
sis.
be in class.
Yes, ma'am. I can't
Very
wait to
soon.
see you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And thank you for joining us today and tuning in to National Network View News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel, NNV News. This is Rosalind Parks with National Network View News. Good night.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.